On the day I came of age, snow was falling heavily. He said he wanted to break off the engagement. Looking at the young man before me, noble in appearance but with hatred in his eyes, I knew he, like me, had been reborn. In our past lives, the woman he loved entered the palace and became a consort, and he married me only out of obligation. For 3 years as husband and wife, all he showed me was indifference and resentment. After his beloved died in childbirth, he went mad. He set fire to the Sia residence and tried to take me with him into the flames. Now, given this second chance, he must want to stay by his true love's side. In front of the rock garden, he looked eagerly at my cousin as he broke off our engagement. It must be heaven's will to fulfill my devotion. Behind the rock garden, a man in an imperial yellow robe leaned close to my ear and whispered, "Isn't it just so?"
1.
Snow was falling thickly in December. Siezichin knelt on the ground, seemingly unaware of the cold, his back straight as a board. My mind is made up. I must end this engagement today. With the help of my maid, I stepped out into the courtyard. The snow beneath my feet felt soft, but the chill in the air reminded me it was all real. I had truly been reborn on the very day I came of age. My father had thrown a grand banquet for me, and the hall was filled with nobles from the capital. Now, all eyes were fixed in one direction, toward the heir of Duke Siezichin, who had dropped to his knees before even entering the banquet hall. Who would dare break off an engagement on a young woman's coming-of-age day? It was a disgrace to the Chui family and a stain on the Xie family's honor. My father, enraged, smashed his wine cup. Duke Wei, face ashen, scolded his son. "Have you been drinking before the banquet? Are you out of your mind?" But Siezichin repeated only one sentence. "I want to break off the engagement with the Chui family. I will not marry Chui Wan." He looked like a teenager, but the stubborn chill in his eyes was all too familiar. So, it turned out he had been reborn as well.
2.
In our previous lives, Siezichin also came to my coming-of-age banquet, but he didn't break off the engagement. He was known throughout the capital as a refined gentleman, well-mannered and strictly brought up, always respectful of decorum. Even when he learned that the woman he loved was about to be chosen for the palace, all he did was get drunk alone during my banquet, so drunk he passed out. But that drunkenness sealed our childhood engagement for good. The next day, everyone in the capital knew that the heir of Duke Wei, in his drunken state, had stumbled into the room of a young lady from the Chui family, me, who had just come of age, and spent the night there. My family was outraged. Their daughter had been violated in her own home, and now had to bear the shame. Duke Wei dragged Siezichin out to apologize, saying he had lost control from drinking. The families then decided to bring the wedding forward. Siezichin agreed to everything, but once married, he came to hate me. "I never knew Miss Chui was so cunning, so shameless," he once sneered. "You think forcing me into this will make me love you? How laughable. If you don't believe me, just watch." Even though it had been his mistake, he looked at me with cold disdain. The one he loved was my cousin, Zheng Yuezhu, who was to enter the palace. When he couldn't win her back, he planned to volunteer for a post on the border after my banquet and never return. But that one drunken night ruined everything. It ruined his lofty dreams, the pristine snow, the one pure love he had meant to give only to her. So, he pretended to be happy, agreed to the marriage, then spent the next 3 years treating me with nothing but coldness and contempt. Even when I was sick, he kept it secret from my parents and just sat at my bedside, staring at me indifferently. "Chui Wan, this is what you wanted." The day news came that Zheng Yuezhu had died in childbirth. He stepped into my courtyard for the first time. The maid said that I had waited long enough and that my moment had finally come. Her joyful chatter sparked a small hope in my heart, and I let her dress me up. But Siezichin approached me reeking of wine. He looked at my nervously fluttering eyelashes and suddenly laughed. I opened my eyes, only to see ridicule in his gaze. "What are you expecting?" he said. "I was just wondering if you were pregnant and then died in despair during childbirth, what kind of expression you'd wear?" 3. My face went pale. Enraged and shocked, I slapped him. 3 years of humiliation surged up all at once. Siezichin, if you never wanted this, why did you marry me? You think your love is noble and pure, but what did I ever do to deserve this? How can you treat me this way? Suddenly, he grabbed the candle by his side, eyes dark and menacing. I was drunk that night, but you weren't. You still won't admit this was your scheme? I was dizzy that night. I don't know what I ate, but I felt faint. They helped me back to my room, and when I woke up, you were there. I had said this same explanation countless times over 3 years. Siezichin was sick of hearing it, but he still wouldn't believe me. He let out another cold snort, then, as I screamed, he set the curtain ablaze with a candle flame. I wanted you to suffer like Yuezhu, but I'm afraid she's been waiting too long down there. So today, you're coming with me. When you see her, explain everything. Tell her it was all your fault. Tell her she was the only one I ever loved. Lunatic. You're a lunatic. I want to go back to the Chui family. I turned to run, but he dragged me back. His bloodshot eyes gleamed with familiar scorn. You got all dressed up today. Did you really think I was going to consummate the marriage? So what if I did? So what if I got pregnant? Do you think I'd ever matter to you? That a child from me would matter? She was the moon in the sky. You're just dirt on the ground. How can you even compare? The fire spread. I was too devastated to even make a sound. I didn't know if it was the smoke choking me or the fear of death. Tears just kept streaming down my face. Siezichin, my parents always said I was the most precious treasure in the world, destined for a happy life. If I'd never met you, I probably would have had it. He seemed frozen for a moment. Then the roof beam collapsed, and I lost consciousness. When I opened my eyes again, it was the day of my coming-of-age ceremony. 4. At last, the snow in the courtyard stopped falling. Our fate ends here, Siezichin said. Miss Chui, I hope you'll come to terms with it soon. Dragging it out won't help either of us. He looked straight at me, his gaze unwavering. Forcing this will only make us a pair of resentful spouses. You unfilial son. Duke Wei stormed forward, grabbed a guard's sword, with his scabbard still on, and struck Siezichin hard on the back. You dare spout such nonsense. Where has all your upbringing gone? Each blow landed harder than the last. Duke Wei had been a top-ranking military champion in his youth, and disciplining his scholarly son like this seemed like using a blade to cut tofu, too much force for too little resistance. Seeing blood appear at the corner of Siezichin's mouth, my father stepped in to stop him. His daughter's coming-of-age banquet had already been marred enough. If someone died, things would only get worse. He calmed Duke Wei down and then turned to Siezichin with a frosty glare. I watched you grow up. Since you call me Uncle Chui, I'll speak plainly. My daughter, Chui Wan, whether in talent or beauty, is in no way beneath you, young Master Xie. Siezichin looked up at me, momentarily stunned. Miss Chui is virtuous and graceful, her beauty unmatched among the ladies of the capital. In that case, my mother arrived in haste and tightly grasped my hand. Her usually gentle face was now cold as frost. You will stand outside our Chui residence and shout 3 times. Siezichin is unworthy of Chui Wan. I hereby request to break off the engagement. Then we'll call it done.
5.
Siezichin's face instantly darkened. He hadn't expected this from Princess Roman, who had always looked at him with such warmth and affection. Seeing my surprise, my mother gently patted my hand. Wanner, take a good look. A man's promises mean nothing, but when he's willing to throw away all dignity just to walk away, that's when you know his heart is truly made of stone. Then I understood. My mother wasn't just punishing Siezichin for ending the engagement in public without any regard for me. She was also trying to comfort me, to help me let go. In our previous lives, even though Siezichin woke up in my room filled with hatred toward me, he still put on the same gentlemanly mask. My parents had watched him grow up and trusted him completely, and he fooled them all. Now, even a sliver of resistance on his part was enough for them to cancel this marriage. Their only concern was me. At that thought, I squeezed my mother's hand in return. Don't worry, mother. I raised my voice and said each word clearly. I never liked young Master Xie in the first place. Xie Zichen, caught in the middle of my mother's demand, looked up in disbelief, staring at me, a mix of shock and confusion in his eyes. Then he gritted his teeth and sneered. Very well.
6.
I really never liked him. The one who did was my cousin. She was the eldest daughter of my uncle. When he was young, he was sent on assignment to the south, where he met Zheng Yan, the only daughter of the Zheng family of Qinghe. He gave up his position in the capital to marry her, even quarreled bitterly with my grandfather over it. My grandfather believed the Zheng family, since the death of the late emperor, had delayed handing over command of the Huainan forces under the excuse of the young emperor's age. He suspected them of plotting in secret. But my uncle only wanted to marry into the Zheng family. He even rode in a wedding palanquin to her house himself, a joke that echoed in the capital for years. Sending his daughter to be raised in the capital was his way of showing loyalty, of dispelling suspicions. So my cousin and I grew up together. I doted on her like an elder sister, even giving her the only one of something if she wanted it. In our previous lives, before she entered the palace, she talked to me daily about Xie Zichen. How handsome he was, how brilliant his mind. But I later realized she left some things out. Like how he invited her to the Lantern Festival at night. Like how he gave her an exquisitely valuable jade hairpin. Like how he had hidden her name within a poem he recited at a poetry gathering. She hid all that. Instead, she often said, "You and the young master suit each other so well." She also often brought up our engagement. I didn't take it seriously. My parents said it depends on whether I like him. Her hand, hanging at her side, slowly clenched. So uncle and aunt really do dote on little sister, she said softly. Later, after what happened at the coming-of-age banquet, I soon married Xie Zichen. In the second year of our marriage, I paid my respects to her, now a noble consort in the palace. She patted my hand fondly and said, "Little sister married the very man all noble ladies in the capital dreamed of. You're so blessed." Even when he was away on assignment in Nangguang, he still had delicacies sent to you. The guards said they ran 2 horses to death just to deliver them. Would you like a taste? Oh, silly me. You're newlyweds, and he treats you like a treasure. You must have already had your fill. But when Xie Zichen went to Nangguang, I never received a single dish or word from him. After that, these kinds of incidents kept happening. One in the palace, one in the court, like they were playing out some twisted love story. To me, it was a nightmare. Even as I lay dying, I begged the heavens to open their eyes and not let me become trapped in someone else's karma. Eyes stinging with unshed tears, I came back to myself. Xie Zichen was kneeling outside the Chui residence, saying at last, "I, Xie Zichen, know I am unworthy of Chui Wan. Today, I humbly request to break the engagement." He raised his head and looked at me from afar. And under that stunned gaze, I slowly smiled. After 10 years of knowing each other and 3 years of marriage, this was the first right thing he ever did. 7. That night, my body began to heat up. I felt dazed and lightheaded, just like in my previous life. Before the coming-of-age ceremony, I'd hardly eaten anything in order to keep my appearance pristine, except for that plate of pastries my cousin brought me. After everything I'd experienced in both lives, I understood now. She had ill intentions toward me. And yet, even reborn, I was still one step too late. Fortunately, though she wanted to ruin me, her possessiveness wouldn't allow Xie Zichen to truly touch me. So the drug she used wasn't that strong. Plus, I was already alert and on guard this time. I wouldn't let myself sleep through the night like before. I walked out to the back garden for some air, and there I heard a man and woman speaking in hushed tones. It was Xie Zichen and my cousin, Zheng Yuezhu. "Your Grace, I went early this morning to the temple to pray for Wan. Why are you here? Shouldn't you be? Yuezhu, the one I love is you, not Chui Wan." Xie Zichen didn't notice the surprise flickering across Zheng Yuezhu's face. He grabbed her hand and poured out a lifetime's worth of longing. Heaven must have heard my prayers, finally letting me fulfill my devotion. Zheng Yuezhu's face at that moment could only be described as horrified. Though they had met in secret many times before, she had always kept a thin veil of propriety in place, relying on Xie Zichen's reserved nature to control the pace. Never had she seen him speak so bluntly. She quickly composed herself. "Your Grace, you are still engaged to my cousin. How can you say such things? Yuezhu, you've only just returned, you must not know. I've already broken off the engagement with Cui Wan," he said earnestly, eyes fixed on her. "Now, I can finally propose to you." Even someone as composed as Zheng Yuezhu couldn't smile at that. She yanked her hand free and snapped, "Your Grace, don't speak nonsense. In a few days, the palace matron will come to escort me. I belong to the emperor. How could you propose marriage to me?" Xie Zichen's face went deathly pale. "Yuezhu, you said it was such a pity I was engaged, that if I weren't, you'd be with me. Aren't you happy?" Watching the two of them argue, I shook my head and muttered, the emperor really should have locked them up together. Why bother separating them? They deserved each other in the last life. And what exactly did I deserve? A cool voice whispered near my ear. I jumped and turned around, only to find myself face to face with Li Xiujin. My knees went weak, and I nearly dropped to the ground. "Why, Your Majesty?"
8.
Before me stood a young man in a black fox fur cloak, hiding the golden dragon robe underneath. Snowflakes clung to his calm brows, softening the sharpness in his gaze as he looked at me. I hadn't seen him once after my wedding in the previous life. Now, he looked just as young, like time had never passed. But I had always feared him. Something etched deep into my bones. I tried to bow, but nearly stumbled. He reached out and caught me, holding me firmly. I wanted to quickly rise and thank him, but perhaps because of how close I was, the effects of the drug flared up again. My limbs went weak, and I collapsed into his arms, unable to move. His usually unreadable eyes stirred with emotion. Frowning, he looked down at me. "Cui Wan, what's wrong with you?" If my father saw me like this, clinging to the young emperor he devoted his life to educating, he'd probably clutch his chest and cry out, "You've disgraced the family." I forced myself upright with the last bit of strength I had. "Your Majesty, I'm fine. See, I'm—" Before I could finish, I fell again, this time directly into his arms. He caught me instantly, almost reflexively, and held me tight. A soft sigh, tinged with unease, landed on the top of my head. "Cui Wan. Who's there?" Xie Zichen's voice rang out from behind the rock garden. Zheng Yuezhu had also snapped back to her senses. She paled and forced composure into her tone. "If someone sees us meeting under the moonlight like this, what happens to my palace appointment?" Xie Zichen paused, thrown off by her reaction, but still turned toward the back of the rock garden. The sound of their footsteps grew closer. I couldn't care less. I grabbed onto Li Xiujin's sleeve and looked toward the narrow path by the rocks. "Your Majesty, we should hide." He raised an eyebrow and calmly tightened his hold around my waist. "Why should I hide?"
9.
I'd considered the possibility that, with Li Xiujin's cold and distant personality, he might just leave me and walk away. What I didn't expect was that he never even thought of moving. Besides my father, I'd never seen Li Xiujin listen to anyone. Now, even eavesdropping behind a rock wall seemed perfectly normal to him. All I could do was sigh inwardly. Being an emperor really is convenient. No shame, and no one dares to say a word. So when Xie Zichen and Zheng Yuezhu rounded the corner, what they saw was the young emperor, perfectly composed, holding me tightly in his arms, while I buried my face, trying to shrink myself out of existence. "Why, Your Majesty?" They both gasped and dropped to their knees in a panic. For some reason, the sight of them groveling like that gave me a satisfying sense of payback. Li Xiujin had ascended the throne at 10, reading petitions and handling court matters. The entire court respected him. While other children his age were still worrying about getting whipped by teachers, boys like Xie Zichen, first in class and top of every exam, looked up to him with admiration, calling him the ruler they would one day serve. I'd heard that Xie Zichen once wrote a poem for the young emperor, expressing his loyalty and admiration, but the emperor only responded with, "Stick to substance. No flattery, no exaggeration." Xie Zichen was so humiliated, he skipped class for 3 days. I was 2 years younger than him and constantly saw my father proudly bringing home volumes of the emperor's writings. I was terrified of Li Xiujin growing up. He had a presence that demanded respect, making it hard for anyone to approach. And yes, I was also a little jealous because it felt like he'd stolen my father from me. Li Xiujin was, to our entire generation in the capital, a nightmare. But now, watching everyone afraid of him, I realized, maybe he wasn't so scary after all. "Stand up," Li Xiujin said. Before they could rise, his gaze had already landed on me in his arms. Xie Zichen pressed his lips into a hard line and hissed, "Cui Wan, what are you doing?" Zheng Yuezhu's hand clenched tightly around her dress, eyes locked in hatred on the emperor's arm wrapped around me. "Your Majesty, my cousin has always been spoiled. Today is her coming of age. She must have defended you somehow." Li Xiujin raised his eyes lazily. "Did I say she offended me?" Zheng Yuezhu froze. "And no, Your Majesty. You say she's spoiled. Yet your uncle, the Grand Tutor, complains all day that his daughter is too obedient. So, as her cousin, you know her better than her own father?" Xie Zichen turned to look at Zheng Yuezhu, watching as she lost her composure. She quickly tried to explain, "I misspoke, Your Majesty. My younger cousin has a lovely temperament." I had no interest in hearing more. All I knew was that my body felt burning hot, like I was on fire. And Li Xiujin's cool skin felt so good, I couldn't help wanting to be closer. So I gave in to the impulse. I wrapped my arms around his neck like a morning glory twining up a tree. Xie Zichen and Zheng Yuezhu were stunned. "Cui Wan, do you even know what you're doing right now?" That was Xie Zichen, grinding the words out between his teeth. He always had a way of ruining the mood. I snuggled deeper into the crook of Li Xiujin's neck and gazed at the tip of his ear, now tinged pink. "Of course I know," I murmured with a sigh of contentment. "And this feels really nice." Li Xiujin's ears turned even redder.
10.
Xie Zichen stared at me, his brows furrowing deeper and deeper, until the flush on my cheeks made him freeze. As if something dawned on him, all the blood drained from his face. "So, you were telling the truth." He said it out of nowhere, but I knew exactly what he meant. Back then, I had explained to him countless times that I was also a victim the night of our betrothal banquet. He never believed me. Worse, he often mocked me for it. Now, he finally believed it. Believed I'd never schemed to trap him. But for him, that truth must have been even harder to accept. I was still staring blankly at him when a warm hand gently covered my eyes. Then Li Xiujin's cold voice came from above me. "If there's nothing else, you may leave." It was directed at the two kneeling before him. But Xie Zichen suddenly stepped forward. "May I ask, where is His Majesty planning to take Cui Wan?" Though he was a subject, his tone was laced with suspicion. Li Xiujin gave him a faint glance. "Must I report to you?" Xie Zichen lowered his head. "I wouldn't dare. Only, today is Cui Wan's coming-of-age ceremony, and Your Majesty has just returned from a hunting trip in the northern mountains. Rumors tend to spread easily." "Appreciate your concern," Li Xiujin replied coolly. "I'm merely stopping by to visit the Grand Tutor." He removed the hand covering my eyes, letting my flushed face show for just a moment before shielding it again. "Or perhaps young Master Xie would like to tell me, what exactly is wrong with Cui Wan?" Xie Zichen saw me dazed and was about to speak. My little cousin was heartbroken after the engagement was called off. Zheng Yuezhu cut in smoothly. "She drank too much, and now she seems a bit drunk." As she spoke, she discreetly tugged at Xie Zichen's sleeve, signaling him to stop talking. "Engagement called off," Li Xiujin repeated. "All I heard was that young master, Xie, stood outside the Cui residence shouting that he was unworthy of Cui Wan." He raised a brow and stared directly at Xie Zichen. "So self-aware," he said slowly. "I'm quite pleased for Duke Wei." He deserves a reward. How about the pheasant I hunted today? According to my father, His Majesty never gifted pheasants. They're not phoenixes, he used to say. How could a pheasant be a reward? It wasn't an insult, but it was definitely a jab. Siezichin accepted the reward, looking thoroughly miserable with his head lowered. I guessed he might be remembering the poem he poured his heart into at age 10, dedicated to the emperor, only to be met with a flat response. Stick to substance. No fanfare. He might have gotten a better reaction yelling, "I'm a fool," at the top of his lungs. 11. Zheng Yuezhu took a step forward. Your Majesty, thank you for your care. I ran into young Master Xia while looking for my cousin. Perhaps your Majesty would allow me to take Wanwan back. Li Xiujin didn't respond. His silence made my chest tighten. The drug's effects hadn't worn off yet, and the memories of how these two tortured me in my past life were still vivid in my mind. If I were handed back to Zheng Yuezhu, I might be reliving the same nightmare by morning. Among the three standing here, the only one I could trust was Li Xiujin. Despite his imperial aura, he made me feel safe. I could only hope that, for the sake of our childhood friendship, or my parents' loyalty to the throne, he wouldn't give me back to them. I burrowed into his arms a little deeper and, in a muffled voice, called out to him the way I did when I was a child. Brother Jean? No one knew. When I was still too young to understand the world, before my cousin entered the capital, my only playmate had been Li Xiujin. Back then, the late empress was still alive. My mother would often visit the palace to keep her company. While the adults talked, I would run up to the Imperial study window and wave at him. Once he'd seen my father off, he would sneak out to play with me. Later, when the late emperor passed, the empress clung to young Li Xiujin and held power behind the throne. Years later, she took her own life to return authority to the court. After that, Li Xiujin never came out again. I remember my mother holding me and sighing. From now on, Jeaner will find less and less joy in life. We grew distant. I only heard of him through my father's endless praise. That boy who once loved to make me laugh had grown into a solemn emperor. Now, after all these years, here I was again, seeking shelter from the very boy who once ran out to meet me. Can you stay with me? I whispered. Brother Jean? 12. I was awakened the next morning by the sound of my father's furious voice. He and my mother were arguing behind the screen in my room, their voices growing louder and sharper. A man and a woman alone for the entire night, in her bedroom. What on earth was he thinking? That sentence sounded so familiar. It jolted me upright from bed. My eyes were still groggy, my mind not fully awake. And just like in my past life, I was met with mocking voices, my cousin's exclamation, and Siezichin's cold, hateful glare. What followed was a blur. I became the daughter-in-law of the Xia family. I died for the sake of his beloved, martyred in the flames. The raging fire devoured the hair my mother had brushed for me thousands of times, devoured the silk and brocade my father had sent into the Xia household for me to wear. In my final moments, I tried to wrench free of Siezichin's iron grip. But I failed again and again. He sneered at me from within the flames, cold and cruel. Don't waste your strength. You're coming with me to see Yuezhu. I was filled with grief and despair. I screamed that he was insane, that I wanted to go home, that I missed my parents, but his cruelty left me nowhere to turn. Yuezhu always envied you for your loving parents, but you'll never see them again. You'll never return to the Cui family. Even in death, you'll be buried in the Xia ancestral tomb as my wife. That way, Yuezhu can feel a bit more at peace. The memories came in waves, each scene painfully vivid, as if I were still trapped in them, unable to escape. My parents rushed in from outside and shook me awake. My mother held my trembling body and gently stroked my back again and again. Did you have a nightmare, sweetheart? Something burning? Mom's right here. Don't be scared. I opened my eyes. The room was empty save for my parents. There were no cousin and her giggling friends watching the show. No Siezichin, glaring with resentment as he vowed to marry me just so he could ruin me slowly. I let out a long breath, though my chest was still tight with unease. My father's expression was tense. "Tell me the truth," he said. "Did His Majesty do something to you?" I blinked. Li Xiujin. My mother was brushing my hair as she explained what had happened. The nightmare from my previous life hadn't repeated. Li Xiujin had ordered the Imperial guards to surround my courtyard, and he had stayed by my side through the night. All my parents knew was that no one had been allowed near me yesterday, and that the Emperor himself had walked out of my room at dawn. I recalled a peaceful night and a gaze watching over me for a long time. My father pieced together what must have happened, but he didn't look relieved. His expression was still stormy. At least His Majesty was discreet. My mother tried to comfort him. He said nothing, only told me to rest well, and then strode out of the room. My mother turned to me, eyes full of concern. "Your father and I only wish for your peace and happiness. But why do you always hold everything in? You were never like this as a child. Somehow, as you grew up, the little bit of temper we worked so hard to nurture was worn away." She fell into quiet reminiscence, her gaze soft and aching. I remembered. When I was little, I had been spoiled, lively, and carefree. Then my cousin arrived. I often saw her crying quietly in corners. I asked her why she was sad. "With parents by your side, you can act so freely. But I was born unlucky. Every time I see you ask for what you want so boldly, do what you please with no consequences. It makes me feel so sad." She cried so hard, I didn't know how to comfort her. From then on, whenever she saw me ask our parents for something, or run out to play without being scolded, she'd cry again. "Sister, how can you be so willful?" She was always correcting me, as if she couldn't bear to see me act out of line, even a little. Gradually, I became more restrained. But I never realized it made my parents worry. My mother held my hand. "Your father and I swore an oath to protect Gina at all costs. Your father gave all he had to teach the young emperor. From the start, we were bound by duty. Just like many others in this world, including His Majesty, none of us ever had the luxury of living freely. But you're the one we hoped could live without restraint. Our Wanwan, even if she's a little spoiled or a bit unreasonable, that's perfectly fine." I felt a lump in my throat and clung to her, not wanting to let go. "Mom, can I live without ever becoming someone's wife?" "Is it because of your nightmare?" I nodded. She stroked my cheek with pity, asking no further. "Of course you can. Then your father and I will love you all our lives." 13. Afraid I might dwell too much on my nightmare. And with the princess consort of Pingnan hosting her birthday banquet, my mother took me along to attend. I heard there was a bamboo forest in the palace, so I wandered off for a walk, only to run into Xiezichin. "Cui Wan, what's your relationship with the emperor?" He didn't even greet me, just dived straight into that condescending tone I knew all too well from my last life. I felt uncomfortable and ignored him, walking past without a word. But he grabbed my wrist, forcing me to face him. "You came back too, didn't you?" Just as I had seen that familiar look in his eyes, he seemed to see it in mine too. I let out a cold laugh. The engagement was over. What was there to hide? "So what? Want to kill me again?" His lips tightened, but he didn't deny it. After a pause, he said, "You were drugged last night. So, why were you with the emperor? Or, now that you've been given another chance, you've set your sights elsewhere?" What was he angry about? I didn't care anymore. In fact, I enjoyed provoking him. "Yes. That's exactly what I'm doing. You broke off our engagement and ran to propose to my cousin. Why can't I go to the man I want?" His face turned white, then flushed red. "Man you want? You don't like me?" Before I could speak, he clutched my wrist tighter. "You're doing this just to spite you? You'd throw away your future over a petty grudge." The way he looked now, like a cat with its tail stepped on, was honestly pathetic. "Xiezichin," I said coolly, "listen closely. I never liked you. I never schemed to marry you. You should understand that after last night, you and your beloved ruined my entire life, and now you want to get in my way again." He let go of my hand and took 2 steps back, shaking his head. Chui Wan. He's the emperor. You saw what happened to Yuezhu last time. Don't you remember her fate? You just worry about your precious Yuezhu. Who I'm with is none of your business. He moved to block me again, but I casually kicked him. Caught off guard, he stumbled straight into the nearby pond. The water was shallow, but muddy. Construction had barely begun. His luxurious robes were now a soaked, filthy mess. Chui Wan, you dare. He floundered in the sludge, humiliated and furious. What don't I dare? I replied coldly. I only regret I can't lock you in a room and burn it down. Or maybe I should throw your beloved in too. Help you fulfill your grand wish. How about that? Even covered in mud, his shock was unmistakable. We were given another life. I thought the past would be behind us, an unspoken truce. Do you really hate me that much? That made me laugh. Looking at this so-called gentleman flailing in the muck, I could only sigh that the whole capital must be blind to have ever called him the most eligible bachelor. If Li Xiujin weren't off limits, would they have even looked at Xie Zichen? We had no truce, Xie Zichen. Open your eyes wide. Live well. This is just the beginning. My past life suffering, every bit of it, will not go unavenged. I strode past him, only to turn the corner at the end of the bamboo forest and run right into someone. Li Xiujin stood there, his narrow eyes glinting with a hint of amusement. He watched me silently. I couldn't help myself. Your Majesty, are you addicted to eavesdropping now? 14. Maybe it was my mother's words this morning, telling me to be a little more willful and proud. Maybe it was the lingering anger from my run-in with Xie Zichen. But for once, I wasn't afraid of Li Xiujin at all. I looked straight at him and said with reckless abandon, Your Majesty, you saw it. Yes, I pushed him. I'm exactly what they say I am, arrogant and spoiled. He only smiled and replied, The Grand Tutor would be pleased. What did this have to do with my father? I was just about to ask when I noticed his gaze drop to my wrist, the one still red from Xie Zichen's grip. His face darkened as he reached toward me. I instinctively drew back, and his hand froze midair. Last night, you weren't this wary of me. I was drugged last night. I replied calmly. If I offended your Majesty in any way, it wasn't intentional. Li Xiujin withdrew his hand, but his eyes stayed on the red marks on my skin. The one who poisoned you. How do you want to deal with them? From the look on his face, he already knew who it was. She holds a special status. Nothing much will happen to her. My cousin was still under the Chui family's roof, raised as a guest of honor by the powerful Zheng family of Qinghe. My parents were aware of the situation and discreetly dealt with the maid she planted at my side. They were deeply apologetic to me. Besides, my cousin was about to enter the palace. Thinking of that, I looked at Li Xiujin and said, Your Majesty, could you not let her into the palace? If Zheng Yuezhu entered the palace, things would unfold just like before. She'd smile sweetly, act like a loving sister, then force me to visit her constantly and find every way possible to torment me. Li Xiujin was startled. He suddenly raised his eyes and looked at me with lazy amusement. Why don't you want her in the palace? I was scrambling for an excuse when he leaned in and whispered, Even before you broke off the engagement with Xie Zichen, I'd already considered it. Do you know why? I blinked, then began to analyze aloud. My father and Duke Wei may be old friends, but they disagree on everything politically. Your Majesty was worried that if the Chui and Xie families became in-laws, court debates would get too quiet. There was a long silence. I looked up, eyes wide, at the tension in Li Xiujin's face. Chui Wan. It was the first time anyone had called my name through clenched teeth. Was I wrong? You really are your father's daughter. To which I replied, And you, your Majesty, are very much the emperor. That was close. I nearly messed up the flattery. 15. I had a sneaking suspicion Li Xiujin was mad at me, but I had no proof. During the birthday banquet for the old princess consort, no matter how lively the performances got, he sat there the whole time with a stony face. I began to wonder if my attempted flattery had actually backfired. I kept sneaking glances at him on the main dais, but he looked like he didn't want to spare me even a glance. A chill crept over me. This was bad. I still had two enemies to deal with, and the only powerful backing I could somewhat emotionally rely on might have just been burned to ashes by my own mouth. Could it be that he actually liked Zheng Yuezhu? In the previous life, after she became a consort, she was quite favored. Otherwise, she wouldn't have constantly flaunted it in front of me. Wait, no, that can't be right. What she flaunted were Siezichen's affections. But she did have a royal child in the last life. While I was still lost in thought, Zheng Yuezhu re-entered, now dressed in a flowing gown of luminous silk. She stood and began to dance, graceful, dreamlike. Her uncle in Heching had sent a letter to the emperor, saying, if His Majesty allowed Yuezhu to enter the palace and be named a consort, he would willingly hand over control of the Huainan military forces. This was no secret among the nobles in attendance. The other aristocratic families had faded. Only the Zheng family still held power. Ever since Li Xiujin's ascension, the Zhengs had clung to their grip on Huainan's troops like their lives depended on it. No one knew how my uncle, who'd married into their family, finally convinced them. No battles, no bloodshed, just the title of consort, and Li Xiujin could recover full control. It was an opportunity too good to pass up. Surely, just like in my past life, he'd follow through and welcome my cousin into the palace, right? How childish I was to think I could dissuade him. I watched his long-frozen expression finally soften. This dance. Maybe it was Yuezhu's way of reminding him, it's time to make the announcement. When the performance ended, she walked gracefully to the center of the hall to offer birthday wishes to the princess consort. But her eyes never left Li Xiujin. The princess consort, no fool, quickly picked up on her intentions. She called Yuezhu to sit at her side and praised her at length, then turned to the emperor. Yuezhu has lived alone in the capital all these years. She's truly admirable. She's grown so beautifully. Your Majesty, she's already 17. It's time she settled down. Allow me to ask for your blessing, so her parents back in Heching may rest easy. The princess consort was from the Zheng family, too, Zheng Yuezhu's aunt. She must have heard that my uncle's letter had reached the palace but received no reply. Li Xiujin said, of course. He tapped his fingers on the armrest of his chair, then slowly looked across the room. In that case, let's not delay. Today, I shall bestow a marriage upon her. Zheng Yuezhu had been smiling shyly, her head bowed. But the moment he spoke, her body trembled. She looked up, stunned. What? 16. When an emperor personally grants a marriage, he certainly wouldn't offer the bride to himself. The guests began whispering among themselves, all speculating about what His Majesty truly intended. And just as Li Xiujin's gaze swept through the eligible young nobles of the capital, Zheng Yuezhu began to panic. She frantically shot looks at the princess consort who had spoken up earlier. The princess consort hadn't expected that her gentle urging would turn into something like this. Flustered, she stammered, Your Majesty, a marriage grant? Did you perhaps forget? Qing has sent a letter. By this point, she was essentially ripping the pretense apart in front of everyone. But Li Xiujin still looked confused. A letter? When did that arrive? I've just returned from a 2-week hunting trip in the northern mountains. The memorials have piled up. I haven't gone through them yet. Is there something urgent from the Zheng family? Zheng Yuezhu nearly fainted on the spot. She swayed and was quickly supported by the princess consort. In the past 2 weeks, the news that she was about to enter the palace had spread like wildfire. The Zheng family had assumed that the emperor wouldn't pass up such an ideal chance to reclaim military command, so they'd let the rumors fly across the capital while he was away, partly to build momentum for Zheng Yuezhu's palace entrance, and partly out of the same contempt they'd always held for Li Xiujin, thinking he had no choice but to agree. But now he'd said, with a straight face, that he hadn't seen the letter. Who would dare tell him that everyone in the city had read the letter's contents, except the emperor himself? The princess consort was speechless. She was already elderly, and now her own family had hung her over open flames. And no urgent matter. My younger sister and her husband just mentioned Yueju's marriage in a family letter. We thought perhaps their request was repeated in the letter to your majesty. In that case, Li Xiujin said lightly, there's no need to read it. Today, I'll bestow Zheng Yueju with a fine match. He tapped his fingers on the armrest, then lifted his eyes to scan the room. I believe she and the heir of Duke Wei would make quite the pair. Xie Zichen, do you accept? Xie Zichen, who had changed into new clothes and just returned to the banquet, had barely sat down when his name was called again. He hadn't even processed what was happening. But how could he not want this? Across both lifetimes, he'd gone mad for this very outcome. And yet now, he didn't immediately agree. Instead, he instinctively turned to look in my direction. Everyone at the table noticed. And then all those gazes followed his, to me. My mother's face instantly turned cold. And so did Li Xiujin's. Where are you looking, young Master Xie? The emperor said, his voice light but cutting. You weren't worthy of the last engagement, but surely this one suits you. There's no need to doubt yourself. Everyone still remembered how Xie Zichen had stood outside the Chui residence yesterday, loudly proclaiming he wasn't worthy of me. That memory still lingered. Li Xiujin's jab struck exactly where it hurt. My mother's displeasure faded, but now it shifted onto Zheng Yueju's face instead. At last, Xie Zichen said quietly, I am willing. 17. After the banquet ended, one of Li Xiujin's guards came to summon me. Have you guessed it? He stood with his hands behind his back, unreadable. Why, I was hoping you'd break off your engagement with Xie Zichen. After what happened at the banquet, I felt as though the answer was right on the tip of my tongue. And after having had a few cups of fruit wine, thanks to my mother's permission, my courage had grown. Your Majesty, do you like me? Li Xiujin's back stiffened slightly. Then it was like he exhaled. He turned around to face me. In his eyes, dark tides began to stir. So, you no longer think I just enjoy watching ministers argue? I let out a couple awkward laughs and found it hard to meet his gaze. My thoughts were a complete mess, still trying to process the idea that Li Xiujin liked me. But then he stepped closer, brushing a snowflake from my hair. I didn't mean to rush things, but maybe I got scared. Scared that time would pass, and I'd never get another chance. Chui Wana, can you like me? He didn't even refer to himself as I, the emperor, anymore. Maybe to show that the distance between us wasn't so great. He looked at me with quiet hope, completely earnest. By all logic, after living 2 lifetimes, my heart should have grown cold and indifferent. But maybe because I'd never truly fallen for anyone in either life, a strange warmth suddenly bloomed in my chest, and my cheeks burned red. I actually kind of wanted to say yes. The last time I said yes, it was to ease my parents' minds, to accept Xie Zichen's fake affections. But this time, would it lead to yet another terrible ending? My silence made the hope in Li Xiujin's eyes begin to dim. Just before it vanished entirely, he lowered his gaze and placed a flawless green jade token into my palm. I'll wait for your answer, he said softly, no matter what it is. 18. After getting out of the palanquin, my heart was still pounding wildly. I hurried straight toward my room. My father tried to catch up to ask me something, but couldn't keep pace. What's going on with Wanwan? Did she see a ghost? Behind him, my mother replied with a faint sigh. She did. The one ghost you fear most. I ran into my room and buried myself in my blankets, trying to hide my burning face. The next day, as I sat playing with the jade token, my cousin suddenly burst into my room. She was crying pitifully, her tears like falling blossoms. Wanwan, please help me. I don't want to marry into the Xie family. I tucked the token away and calmly looked at her. What kind of help do you need from me, cousin? Say, you want to marry Xie Zichen. Tell everyone you love him. Have your father petition the emperor to issue a new marriage decree. Everyone knows His Majesty listens to your father. This way, you and I both get what we want. She said it so naturally, as if I should give way to her, just like always. Get what we want? But cousin, Xie doesn't love me. If he did, would he have ended the engagement so ruthlessly? In the past life, when the engagement hadn't been broken, she could always talk me into it. But in this life, the truth was right in front of us. Even she looked a bit uncertain. When the heart is sincere, even stone can be carved, she said softly. He's the most sought-after young man in the capital. Every noble lady dreams of him. If you marry him and spend enough time together, he'll come to love you. Is that so, cousin? I put on a puzzled face, and Zheng Yuezhu, thinking she had won, pressed her advantage. Of course. When have I ever lied to you? Well, all right then. Zheng Yuezhu let out a sigh of relief and left smiling. But the very next day, the capital was abuzz with a romantic tale of a match made in heaven. In tea houses and taverns, people whispered excitedly. The couple at the center of it all? Xie Zichen and Zheng Yuezhu. That ancestral jade hairpin from Duke Wei's household. Wasn't that meant for the future daughter-in-law? Someone saw it pinned in Zheng Yuezhu's hair. The night of the Lantern Festival, a servant from some noble household paid 50 taels to rent my boat. When I went to collect it, I saw none other than the two of them, Xie and Zheng, meeting privately. And listen to this. Everyone knows how skilled the young master is at poetry. Last year, he won the top prize at the Heroes Poetry Gathering. Anyone remember the title of that winning piece? Longing for Bamboo. What a fitting title, Longing for Bamboo. The rumors spread fast. More and more people claimed to have seen them alone together, acting unusually intimate. Even during the time when my engagement with Xie Zichen had not yet been officially dissolved, even when talk of Zheng Yuezhu entering the palace was already causing an uproar. One's her fiancé, and the other her cousin. Keeping it all secret like this, poor Miss Cui. If you ask me, all this talk of her entering the palace is nonsense. Why would our young emperor, still so young and with an empty harem, choose a woman with such a messy relationship with her cousin's ex-fiancé? In these rumors, Li Xiujin and I weren't even the main characters, but we became the most pitted. Li Xiujin ascended the throne at 10 and had ruled for 8 years. He was diligent, just, and deeply loved by the people. He often disguised himself and went among them to govern personally. Even his life story evoked sympathy. Many citizens were outraged on his behalf. Some even said that the emperor's decision to grant Zheng Yuezhu's marriage had been a stroke of genius, cleverer than some of his greatest political moves. When Zheng Yuezhu came to see me again, I had my maid stop her at the door. "Let me in. I have something urgent to tell my cousin." "What is there left to say, Miss Zheng? Our young lady has always treated you with kindness. She was even planning to help you with that matter. Was it all a game to you? She's heartbroken and angry. She only just cried herself to sleep. Please don't disturb her." Zheng Yuezhu didn't care if I was asleep. She tried to force her way in, but was stopped by none other than Xie Zichen. She wrinkled her nose at the sight of him. "Your Grace, what is that smell? There's swill on your clothes, eggshells, and vegetable scraps? Where did you come from?" Xie Zichen pressed his lips together and said nothing, face dark with humiliation. The servant next to him wiped some leftover food off his face. "The city's gone mad. They used to throw fresh fruit into our Lord's carriage to show affection. Now it's like they're dealing with a criminal in chains." Zheng Yuezhu still tried to barge into my courtyard, but she stepped back instinctively, covering her nose with her handkerchief. Xie Zichen, now hypersensitive about his pride, saw this. Without a word, he grabbed her hand and dragged her away. "Zheng Yuezhu, everyone else may turn against me today, but you are not allowed to. Let go of me, Xie Zichen. What's on your hand? Is that egg white?" The two of them argued as they disappeared down the path. Only then did I come out. In the previous life, weren't they always sneaking glances and unable to resist each other in secret? Well, let them enjoy this life out in the open. No more hiding, no more shame. Let them cling to each other freely. Tell the servants to clean every inch of the path they just walked on. 19. After that, Li Xiujin began leaving the palace in disguise, inviting me out several times. He was a good emperor, young, yet never arrogant or indulgent. At a tea stand built of bamboo and straw, he would crouch down to chat with an old man, or help a little beggar who had stumbled at his feet, smiling all the while. When performers showed off their skills, he would clap and toss them silver, looking no different from any other well-bred young gentleman in the capital. But I would always hide behind him, not daring to look. He tilted his head slightly. "What's wrong?" A giant beast trained by a Tibetan performer was leaping through hoops of fire, each one stacked higher, each ring burning hotter. I tried to steady my breath, but my fear overwhelmed me. Without realizing it, I grabbed his sleeve. I don't like fire." He stiffened, then slowly turned to find my hand. For some reason, it felt like he was more flustered than I was. "It's my fault. We won't watch anymore." He held my hand, warm and firm, and led me away. But I stopped in my tracks. "Never mind. Suddenly, I don't feel so scared anymore." I stayed behind him, peeking occasionally over his shoulder. But the sparkle from earlier had already vanished from his eyes. He kept looking back at me. With my hand still held in his, my courage grew. I even whispered in awe, "That tiger is amazing. It's not even afraid of the flames. Fire burns so badly." And then Li Xiujin suddenly pulled me into his arms. All around us, people were cheering for the street performers. No one noticed us in the crowd. He just held me tightly, his head bowed, silent for a long time. I should have been the one to ask him what was wrong. But he spoke first, voice hoarse. "Wan, I'm sorry. I almost laughed."
"Why?"
"You didn't know I was afraid of fire." Before I could finish, a thought struck me like lightning. Something clicked. I had to look at him. Had to confirm it. Like flipping over the hidden card on a gambling table. At last I saw it. "Li Xiujin, you were reborn too, weren't you?"
20.
"When?" "The first moment. When I rushed back from the hunt and saw you in front of the rock garden." Away from the crowd, the emotions he had kept in check spilled free. It felt like something was tightening around my throat. "So, the reason you stayed by my side that night wasn't because I asked you to." I knew what that night meant to you. Given the chance to do it all again, I swore I wouldn't let any of it happen. When it comes to you, I can't take any risks. So, in the last life, he lingered on the hunt. But in this one, he rushed back covered in dust. He brought the Imperial guards and personally stood watch outside my door all night. I didn't know what to say. Two souls that had each lived through a lifetime, meeting again in the next. So this was what it felt like. Li Xiujin looked at me. "Wan, this time, I may still be late, but at least no harm came to you. And to prevent any more accidents, I decided to show my hand early. My promise stands forever. Take your time with your answer." 21. I truly did need time to think things through. And Li Xiujin seemed to understand that. From then on, he didn't invite me out again. After my cousin left, my days grew quiet and peaceful. Though who knew what the rumors in the capital had become? Matchmakers from noble families kept showing up at our doorstep. My mother turned them all away, one after another. My father had no objection. He only knew that my mother had promised me, and once she promised something, she'd always follow through. Besides, he said, "You're still so young." What nerve, these people, showing up every day trying to steal someone's daughter away. Outrageous. I was perfectly content with my freedom. But sometimes, for no reason at all, I would think of Li Xiujin. Wonder what he was doing. Whether he thought of me too. I hadn't even asked what happened to my parents after I died in the previous life. And so 2 months passed. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I brought the jade token and set off for the palace. But right at the gate, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in a long time.
Xiezichin.
He looked much thinner, his cheeks slightly sunken. The once proud first gentleman of the capital now resembled nothing more than a down-on-his-luck scholar. After the scandal, he and Zheng Yuezhu had left the capital. They held a rushed wedding at her family's estate in Qinghe. Only the Duke and Duchess of Wei had attended. When they returned, both wore sour expressions. The Duchess later visited my mother in tears. saying she couldn't understand how her only son, raised so well, would leave the capital just to become a live-in son-in-law to such an ambitious family. The Duke's face had turned black with rage. The Xie family has a legacy of loyalty and righteousness, he said. And the Zhengs? A bandit clan squatting on their mountain. Even if I had no heir, I still wouldn't consider that boy my son anymore. As she ranted, the Duchess suddenly fainted. The doctor was called in. She was pregnant, a child late in life. The couple finally had something new to hope for. As for how Xie was faring in the Zheng household, I didn't care. And soon no one in the capital cared either. When we crossed paths again, I only wanted to walk past. But he blocked my way. Cui Wan, why are you going to the palace? What's it to you? I didn't want to entertain him. But then he said from behind me, do you know what that man did to your parents in the last life? Do you know that while I had you locked up in the Xie residence, he had your parents thrown in prison? 22. 5 steps from the palace gates, I came to a halt. He caught up to me. Back then, when you were in the Xie household, your parents treated me well. You think your father didn't know? When the cunning hare dies, the hound is cooked. Your father served as the emperor's teacher. He understood imperial politics better than anyone. He always knew that day would come. Sending you to the Xie family, you thought it was for me? No, it was to entrust you to his old friends, the Duke and Duchess of Wei. It took me a moment to find my voice. So, that's why you hated me. Yes, I hated you. You were just another shackle, no different from the strict rules and family laws that disciplined me growing up. I didn't want a wife chosen by my parents. I wanted a wife of my own choosing. Do you understand that? I blinked slowly. Then, congratulations. Now you have one. A wife your parents disapprove of, but one you love deeply. At that, Xie looked like he couldn't bear it. He shook his head, muttering to himself, no, that's not it, this isn't right. I stood rooted to the spot, unsure whether to go forward or turn back. Li Xiujin, was it true? Was it not? Just as I stared at the towering palace gates, lost in indecision, they opened. One of Li Xiujin's guards stepped out and approached me. His Majesty would like to see you. I followed him inside, through cold, silent corridors, until I saw Li Xiujin lying in bed. His torso was tightly bandaged, stained with blood. His face was pale as paper. Still, he gave me a faint, wry smile. I didn't want you to see me like this, but someone just couldn't stand to let me finish what I started. 23. No matter how many times I asked what happened, he wouldn't say. No matter how much I begged him to wait until he healed, he refused. Instead, he used the last of his strength to confess everything from the past life. It was a scheme planned between the Grand Tutor and me. It was only through his explanation that I finally learned all the things I never knew after marrying into the Xie family. My father had made many enemies over the years while supporting Li Xiujin. Those enemies planned to eliminate him first, then move against the young emperor. So my father and Li Xiujin laid a trap and purged those with disloyal hearts. Afterward, my parents were released safely. Wan, I may know all the tricks of kingship, but I would never harm the Grand Tutor. To me, he was mentor, father, and father-in-law. I rolled my eyes and tried to shake off his hand, but he held on tight. And after I died, what happened to my parents? Li Xiujin hadn't wanted to answer that. But seeing my persistence, he sighed. Your father turned white overnight. Your mother collapsed upon hearing the news and never rose again. But I made sure they lived peacefully for the rest of their days. They returned to the countryside and passed away naturally, surrounded by quiet and green fields. I wiped at the corners of my eyes, unsure what to say. The more unsure I was, the more likely I'd say something wrong. What about you? In the last life, my cousin became your consort. She was pregnant. Then she died. You lost your first child.
Was that?
She died by my hand. What? I couldn't follow. I never touched her. That child wasn't mine. I was stunned. My cousin and Xie so bold. If the Duke of Wei had known, He might have executed his own son on the spot. Thinking of all their flirtations in front of me from the previous life, I began to understand how Li Xiujin must have felt. "They're disgusting," I muttered. "I can see why you would have killed her in anger." "I didn't kill her for that," he said. "I ignored her. Let her carry the child. It shut the court up about heirs. It was convenient, really. But she made a fatal mistake. She turned her attention to you." I froze. I always thought, no matter how she tormented me, she wouldn't kill me. Li Xiujin's face grew even paler. Seeing him like that, I felt my heart soften. "Don't talk anymore. Rest. I'm afraid if I don't tell you now, someone else will turn you against me again." I'm not that easily swayed. I had never seen him like this. So vulnerable, clinging to my hand like he truly feared I'd vanish. On impulse, I leaned in and kissed his fevered lips. "I'm not going anywhere. Okay?" A blush spread across his cheeks, a shade I'd never seen on the ever-composed emperor. He looked so much more lovable than usual. I couldn't help it. I kissed him again. His face turned crimson, his eyes misty as he whispered, "One more kiss and I won't hurt anymore." I didn't hold back. But just as I was about to pull away, a large hand cradled the back of my head. There was nowhere to run. "Li MMPH." He kissed me back, slowly, deeply. Somehow, we'd switched positions. I lay beneath him, breathless from the kiss. Our bodies pressed close. In that hazy moment, I felt something. My cheeks flushed so red, they could bleed. Li Xiujin paused too. But with his thick-skinned nature, the moment only made him more brazen. He nuzzled against my neck, breath ragged. Wan, help your brother Jean, won't you?"
24.
Half an hour later, his wound tore open. An hour after that, my father arrived. He dragged me home like a sack and started scolding me. If someone were scheming, this could count as regicide. The three of us would be finished. I remembered the way Li Xiujin had bled and immediately fell silent in fear. As I was wiping my tears, my father suddenly eyed me suspiciously. "You're telling me a wound like that tore open from just a hug?" "It's true, father. I'm not lying. Maybe I just hugged him too hard." But inside, I blamed Li Xiujin. I'd asked him if it hurt, and he said, "It only hurts unless you do something about it." That wicked man. My father eventually believed me, but both he and my mother were strangely calm. That made me nervous. "Don't you two have anything to ask me?" "We've known about you and him for a while now," my mother said. "Remember that time you had a nightmare?" Your father stormed into the palace with fists clenched, but came back wiping his eyes, saying something about a long talk by candlelight. What else could that mean but that Ajin talked him down? Who said I wiped my eyes? Nonsense, woman. You told me. You said Ajin turned out just as you'd raised him. If he became our son-in-law, at least he wouldn't end up in the hands of those old geezers in court. It's getting late. Let's go, wife. Wanwan needs to rest. After they left, I let out a deep breath. But the moment I remembered what had happened earlier, my face flushed all over again. Still, I couldn't stop worrying about Li Xiujin's reopened wound. I was already thinking about how I might sneak out tomorrow to check on him. 25. Li Xiujin's injury stemmed from the Zheng family losing their patience. In the previous life, they offered to return military command in exchange for Zheng Yuezhu's entrance into the palace. Later, she became pregnant. Then the Zhengs rallied troops across Qinghe's regions and loudly claimed that the tiger tally they had surrendered was fake. They said that if Li Xiujin named Yuezhu's unborn child as crown prince, they'd provide half the real tally. The court was furious, denouncing the Zheng family for shameless manipulation. After Yuezhu and the child died together, the Zhengs launched a rebellion. Duke Wei led the counterattack. Victory came quickly at first, but one careless soldier in camp let it slip that his son had committed arson in the capital, burning down his own home, killing his daughter-in-law in the process. Grief-stricken, the Duke wrote a blood-stained apology to his imprisoned old friend, Cui Yuanshan, then died on the battlefield. When Li Xiujin told me this, he squeezed my hand tightly. Over 100,000 lives were lost in that war. Even though the Zhengs were eventually defeated, that was the greatest regret of my entire reign. So, in this life, you wanted to stop that war before it ever began. I ruled alone for decades. Not a day went by that I didn't replay that war in my mind. I thought through it 1,000 times, hoping for a bloodless solution. So from the moment I was reborn, I began secretly undermining the Zheng family. It's like a parasol. Even the strongest frame, if quietly hollowed out, will eventually collapse. Whatever agents Li Xiujin had planted in their house, the Zhengs had been provoked enough to send assassins into the palace. I looked at the bloody bandages being replaced on his wound, heart aching. So, not completely bloodless then. Li Xiujin smiled. I left the gates wide open, knew they were coming. The blade missed all the vital points. I was fine. But then you arrived and I couldn't. I covered his mouth, ears burning. Don't say it. The Zhengs threw someone under the carriage wheels, he muttered. You know him.
Who?
26. The next time I saw Xiezichen, he was in a prison cart. His clothes were soaked with rotten eggs and food waste hurled by the crowd. His ears full of curses. How dare he try to assassinate the emperor? We finally have a good ruler. One we watched grow up. Capital's most eligible bachelor? More like its most shameless. Educated, born of a noble family. And this is what he became? Shame on the Duke of Wei's household. Duke Wei fought all his life. What a disgrace of a son. Thank goodness he disowned him. The Duchess is pregnant now. At least there's hope. Xiezichen's gaze was vacant.
Until he spotted me.
He stood up, gripping the wooden bars. I pinched my nose, mimicking the disgust he used to show me. Xiezichen, why do you reek like this every day in this life? Were things too clean for you in the last one? He lowered his head, completely lost, like he wanted to disappear. I thought this second chance was for fixing past regrets, to finally live freely. But things didn't go the way I expected. Yuezhu never really liked me.
And
I didn't completely. Young Master Xie, time to move on. He clutched the bars. Cui Wan, if I hadn't listened to the Zhengs last time, if I hadn't killed you, if we just lived quietly, could we have?
No.
He was startled by my firm response. Why not? Because someone once told me, if I hadn't died by your hand, he would have stolen me away. I could still hear his teasing but dead serious words. The only scandal I ever hoped for was taking another man's wife. Xiezichen understood. Before he was taken away, he asked, so now that I've fallen this far, does it ease your hatred? Can you forgive me? I stayed silent for a long time, then sighed. Fine. Thank you. He smiled, relieved, and turned to leave. I stood watching, unmoving. Then, a thunderous noise in the distance. The prison cart burst into flames, swallowing the man inside. Cries of agony echoed through the streets. I slowly lowered my gaze, then turned to the person beside me. Let's go. Now, I truly felt at peace. 27. After handing me the tiger tally, Zhang Yuezhu clung to my hand like it was her last lifeline. Sister,
I did as you said.
I stole it. So now no one will kill me, right? Her eyes were blank and hollow. She hadn't slept in days. Beneath her torn dress, her body was covered in wounds left by the Zheng family. I smiled. Of course not. Didn't I say so in my letter? The emperor wants me dead.
The Zhengs want me dead too. Only you care about me.
As long as I listen to you, I can live. Good girl. I handed her a piece of candy. Go back to your room and hide, all right? Don't let them find you. She nodded and obeyed. Watching her tiptoe away, I thought of my old self. She would never have imagined this reversal. But there was still time. She'd get used to it. She'd do even better than I had. When I gave Li Xiujin the tiger tally as a New Year's gift, he looked at me like he couldn't believe it. This is an exchange for your jade token. Not a bad trade. I've spent years plotting for this, and you just handed it to me. Do I get a reward? A kiss from you? Or a kiss from me? Wait, you mean Wan, it's daytime. I still have to meet with the grand tutor. If I'm late. Li Xiujin. Sigh, oh, what can I do? You're just too capable. I'll have to oblige you. I didn't say you had to, MMPH. Outside the window, the first sunlight of the new year bloomed. Spring snow melted, and everything began to awaken again.